It's not maybe so important that it's me specifically. The idea of like a body doing this labor is pretty important to my work. So my name is Stacey Cann. I'm an artist living in Montreal, Quebec. My work is a durational performance. Most of my work involves durational performance, and this particular work has to do with the idea of nothing and something, and how during COVID especially, thinking about ideas of staying home, doing nothing, staying away from people, how ideas of doing nothing can actually be helping or doing something to improve a situation. Ideas around that involve like climate change and how doing less, flying less, driving less, consuming less actually ameliorates climate change by creating less pollution. And so that's what the work is generally about. There's also kind of a overarching theme in all of my work around ideas of work and labor. And so the work is 6 days and 6 hours a day. So it's really about this idea of like duration and creating, even though I'm just repeating the same word over and over all day, this idea of making something. Yeah, it's interesting because even though I think we're maybe about 10 feet into the thing, which is actually quite a lot, but the roll is, I don't know, 50 feet or something that we're not going to get to the end to. So it's this like kind of notion that even though there's like a lot of labor, there's always like more that could be done. Like obviously there is like an element of this is a festival that ends at some point. So it would not go on forever, but kind of like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill and then it rolling down over and over so that it would be like an infinitely durational piece. But I do find it quite meditative, like just the repeating of the word. At a certain point, like your hand like learns the pattern and you don't really have to think about it nearly as much. It's like, yeah, it becomes like a mark rather than a word. So it becomes more about mark making than the word itself, maybe. So I like the pattern that it makes when it's really even, like the overall pattern over the whole paper. Obviously it's not like perfectly even, but it does kind of create this like optical pattern between like the spaces between the words, kind of create their own lines. And so I do like it to be like reasonably even. It's also just like easier in some ways to write it the same or more or less the same every time. I think it's interesting. I've done lots of like 12-hour, really long durational pieces, and usually they're in gallery spaces where it's like very quiet. I find it's interesting especially with the street performers, because they're like set schedules. So it like helps mark the time in some ways in a different way than like seeing a quiet gallery. You have like no idea really how long you've been doing something. I think the kids' reactions are like the most interesting in some ways. They're really curious about what I'm doing and why. Yeah, so I'm trained as a printmaker. I like the materiality of paper quite a lot. It's like not exactly paper, it's Tyvek because it's outside. I wanted to use a material that was like waterproof and reasonably durable. So Tyvek is actually what they use to wrap the outside of houses, but it still has that kind of fibrous quality that paper has, which I really like. So I switched from doing like mostly print and drawing-based work to primarily performance-based work in 2016 or so. And more recently, I started creating these like instruction manuals to how to perform my artwork. So they're like little drawings with instructions on how, and they're kind of tongue-in-cheek, but the idea would be that anyone would be able to perform this work. And so like my body specifically is maybe not so important, but the idea of like a body doing this labor is pretty important to my work, and that's why it's not just like a finished work. So I guess to answer your question in a very roundabout way, having a person perform the work is really important. It's not maybe so important that it's me specifically. And I mean, part of that is like I'm usually quite silent while I'm working, and I try to like dress reasonably like neutrally. Like the personality of the performer is not super important to the work.